Today on Broad Strokes, Fortune's show that looks at the news that matters to women, we have a lot to talk about. Donald Trump officially released his child care proposals. Social media platforms are still struggling to find a balance between censorship and free speech. And the women of the White House talked about how they get their ideas heard. So let's jump right in. Donald Trump came out with his maternity leave and child care policy this week, and there are a couple key elements. He wants to give all working moms 6 weeks of partially paid maternity leave, and he's also providing some tax breaks and some deductions for the amount that people spend on child care. Hillary Clinton rolled out her plan back in May, and the basic aspects of that are that women and men would get 12 weeks of partially paid maternity and paternity leave, and that she would want to cap the total cost of childcare at 10% of a family's income.
I think it's really interesting that Donald Trump has come out with a child care plan at all. You know, typically the GOP doesn't touch child care or maternity leave, so this is a huge departure from his party, which is, not atypical for Donald Trump. That being said, this plan kind of feels like too little too late. His and Hillary's plans would both not really measure up to what other OECD countries are doing. Also, Donald Trump's plan completely excludes fathers. By not providing an equal paternity leave, you're disincentivizing employers to hire women.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. While we would still be lagging the rest of the world, I would love to see one of these plans go into effect.
Over the past couple of weeks, we've seen some interesting moves by social media platforms as it relates to censorship. Last week, Facebook received a lot of criticism for taking down the photo of the napalm girl. And now this week, we saw Instagram announce a new policy that would allow users to filter comments based on keywords of their own choosing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The reason that Facebook took the photo down is because they have a no nudity policy. In a lot of ways, that can be great and really protective for users. For instance, there's revenge porn, which is essentially when someone ends up with a photo or a video of someone and they put it up without their approval. Saying you can't have nudity on the platform really cuts down on that. But you can see that basically they've applied this rule as a blanket. And the reality is the way that people interact with social media is complicated, and it's hard to make a blanket rule that is really effective.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what makes the Instagram policy so interesting, because they're basically attempting to give users control over what constitutes abuse and what doesn't. So I'm really interested to see what ends up happening, whether this ends up working, which, hopefully it does.
So there was this great story in the Washington Post this week. It was an interview with some women who served in the Obama administration, and particularly at the White House in his first term. And they were saying, when we came into the White House, it was sort of a boys' club. We had a hard time getting invited to the right meetings. We had a hard time getting our ideas heard. But they had this great strategy for dealing with this. So they essentially banded together, and when they were in a meeting, if one woman suggested an idea, another woman would echo it, which basically elevates that idea, make sure everyone hears it, and particularly give credit to the woman who proposed it initially, which stops someone else from sort of swooping in later and saying, oh, that great idea was my great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is such an awesome example of shine theory. Shine theory is this idea that when another woman shines, you shine too. And this kind of goes against this old mentality that I think a lot of women, in previous generations have had, which was basically that there are only like 1, 2, maybe 3 seats at the table, and that if another woman gets them, you're basically out of luck. And so I think this is such a great example of how attitudes are changing and how women are now kind of starting to see that when other women win, they win too.
I just love the idea that women are starting to share these tactics and talk more openly about how we can help each other in the workplace. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have on this week's Broad Strokes. Come back next Friday for another episode on Fortune.com.